Hi everyone, I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and today we are going to mix colors from 3 primary hues to create a rainbow on yarn. And there might be more blending that we see beyond what these colors are, but we're going to be starting with these 6 colors, and we will be mixing them from Jacquard True Turquoise, Jacquard Bright Yellow, and Jacquard Hot Fuchsia. All of these samples were dyed at a 1% depth of shade, which means we had 1 gram of dye per 100 grams of yarn. I did a triangle color mixing exercise to help see the relative potency between our 3 primaries, and then from those colors picked these 3 secondary colors to be the ones that are my goals for today. This purple was done with a ratio of 3 parts pink to 1 part blue. This green was 3 parts yellow to 1 part blue. And this orange was 3 parts yellow to 1 part pink. I've just filled in the other little samples that I had. The orange is definitely the right one to pick. I could have gone with this green for our rainbow, but I liked the brighter feeling one. The purple isn't particularly bright feeling. I think if I did less blue and more pink, it might feel brighter, but I specifically want to go with the recipes that I created from the color mixing. So that way, when we look at our final colorway, we can compare these swatches to the colorway that we create. Today we are going to dye 300 grams of Dyer Supplier 2-ply superwash sock. This yarn is 100% superwash merino wool. It is fingering weight and 2-ply. I haven't dyed this yarn before, but it is so soft, and I am really excited to see how it turns out. If you'd like to learn more about any of the yarn, dyes, or other tools and equipment I'm using for this video, you can find affiliate links down in the video description. Here is my math for today. I'm going to be dyeing 300 grams of yarn, and I want a 1% depth of shade, which is similar to those samples I showed at the beginning. So that means I want 1 gram of dye per 100 grams of yarn. Therefore, I want 3 grams of dye. And because my dye stocks are 1%, which means there's 1 gram of dye dissolved in 100 milliliters of liquid, I'll need 300 milliliters of dye total. And so if I take that 300 milliliters and divide it by 6, I'll need about 50 milliliters of each of these 6 colors that I'm going to mix. Now for the pink, the yellow, and the blue, that's really easy. I just need 50 milliliters of the stock solution. For our mixtures, we determined the ratios that we wanted before. So for example, for the orange, we wanted 1 part pink and 3 parts yellow. For the green, we wanted 3 parts yellow, 1 part blue. And then for the purple, 1 part blue and 3 parts pink. So we will need, for example, the purple, 12.5 milliliters of our blue, and then 37.5 milliliters of the pink. And that ratio is similar for the other mixed colors. Then we will eventually apply all of this onto the yarn. So I will probably dilute all of these colors further so that way I can have more volume to work with. But this is, I guess, the basic situation that we need to mix the colors to get those hues that we want. Using a combination of syringes and graduated cylinders, I measured out the proportions of these colors as we discussed. Once I finished mixing the colors, I filled up each of the cups most of the way with some plain tap water to dilute the dye and make it easier to distribute it over the yarn because we have a greater volume of each of the colors. I will say that right now our rainbow looks legit. If I look at each of the colors at a little bit of an angle, I see all the colors we care about. But let's take a crude little swatch moment. So I'm going to just go in to each color. Once, and we can see that we have a beautiful rainbow. And then wiping off my fingers with that excess color. I have my full-size 4-inch deep catering steam pan here, and I'm coming in with our 300 grams of yarn. I'm going to carefully distribute these in the pan. Now with the yarn in the pan, I can't stretch it out entirely, so I am going to attempt to reasonably well spread out and distribute it within the pan. This is going to mean that we will have some differences between these skeins, but I probably would have some differences between them if it was laid out on the counter anyway. The goal is to have things somewhat spread out so we can create our rainbows. Okay, I do have reusable zip ties on here, and I'm debating a bit how I want to apply the color, because I could use, because it just depends. It really does depend. But let's start with pouring. And actually, here's what I'm going to do. I'll rotate it because I was a little nervous about pouring by the zip ties. So let's start with our pink. And we are going to pour this color on. There is no acid yet in the yarn, and that is so that way we can distribute the color in here. And actually, we may not use all of the color we mix. We might end up getting colors that are a bit lighter. So I am going to be really careful to rinse, or not just rinse, but also wipe my hands in between different colors. But we're getting pretty good color penetration there. Okay, so if that's pink, then we have orange. Actually, this does say pretty well where each of the colors should be. Let's do the yellow. Oh, I do see a rogue little bit of pink there. I'm pouring it on. I'm going to work it in. Work it into the yarn. I'm not going to be flipping, so we're going to hope that we get good penetration of color everywhere. And then our blue. I did squeeze out most, not all, but most of the water from our pre-soak. So that way I can not only, oh no! Did you see that? Oh, bummer. Bummer. Oh, I made a mistake. As I was pressing down, I squirted. And I don't think there's anything I can do to fix that. Shoot. I'm not sure if you guys can entirely see, but I did squirt the blue down onto the yellow. I can certainly minimize it a little bit. Soaked some of it up, but I mean, it's there. It is what it is. I do want to check. Okay, there are definitely some light hatches down below, but we are getting pretty good color penetration here. I feel like the pink, we definitely can go a little further down. And the big reason why, maybe we will add all the color. The big reason why I diluted the dyes is that if I only had it in that 50 milliliters, it would not have spread very far. I would not have been able to get it to move onto the yarn very much at all. Okay, I still have more of each of the primary colors, so we can come back in and add more if we want. But let's do the green. If I used, say, a syringe or a brush, I could have more control over the placement than what I have right now. And so now that I'm going in with the green, I'm trying to be very careful because I don't want to push it too much onto the yellow. I'm a little less worried about the blue. I am blending the colors a little bit at the edge. Oh, that's so pretty. But mainly I'm hoping to work it through the yarn really, really well. That is the goal. And I think with the yellow, I'm going to extend it a bit. Oh, that's almost all of it. Make sure my hands are nice and dry as I'm trying to make sure that it is well worked within where it is supposed to be. And then I can come in and touch this intermediate area. But I don't want to go from the green back onto the yellow, if that makes sense, just because I'm trying to keep some yellow in the yarn. Okay, now let's do the orange. And as I'm pouring it on, this is looking a lot redder. No, this was mostly yellow. Okay. I was like having to take a moment to think, like, did I do the right color, the right recipe? And I was like, no, I did. Again, we have no acid in here right now. I will be adding the acid in towards the end. And the main reason for not having acid is that it's allowing us to help these colors spread a little bit more. If there was acid in the yarn already, then it might start striking. Things can strike pretty quickly. This is so beautiful. I really, really hope we're getting good coverage down below. Okay, now for our purple. I'm pouring it down on that back edge and not just on the yarn. And in part, I'm doing that because I really want to make sure that we don't have some edges with not very much color, and the place where we're most likely to see white left behind is these areas around the ties. So I'm trying, that actually looks pretty good, really, really hard around those ties. This is so pretty, you guys. And I can blend it a little bit, give us some indigo-ish type color. And then coming in, man, I mean, I didn't use very much of the blue. Some colors shift a bit as you add more pigment. And so I'm both like wanting to add more color, but also really nervous to add more color, if that makes sense. I suppose it doesn't hurt. You know what I'm gonna do? As I'm adding more, I'm gonna keep, well, I guess not the yellow, but I could always get more yellow from the dye stock. I'm gonna keep a little bit of each of these colors in reserve, so that way if I find major white patches when I flip it, I can add more. That, I think, will make me feel really good. All right, now we need some acid. The downside of using this container is I couldn't stretch out the skeins flat to really control the distance of each of the colors. So that's a downside. But a perk is that we're not leaking color anywhere. All of the color is contained in here. So I'm adding 2 tablespoons over the yellow. I'm adding another one over the green, one over the orange. I'm adding a lot of acid in, everybody, and we'll massage this in. But I wanted to start with that yellow to sort of protect it a little bit. So this is a lot of acid. I have lost count, but I did at least 1 tablespoon on top of every single color. Okay, and the areas I am most concerned about would be our yellow. So I'm sort of tapping that. Then our orange, which sort of actually, when you combine the orange and the pink, and this is what we had seen a bit in the past, but when you combine that orange and the pink, you get sort of a red color in there. And then with my pink hand, I am pressing into the purple. And then the blue. And then finally back into the green. Okay. Now I just need to move this over to a burner so we can start heating. Okay, there's not a lot of water in here. We are over 2 burners. There's one there, and there's one back there. And I'm gonna put them over medium heat. There is, again, not a lot of liquid in here right now. And I'm expecting that things are gonna heat up pretty quickly and that I am probably gonna wanna add a little bit more water. It is super low immersion right now. So I'm gonna keep an eye on it, and within 5 minutes, as soon as I start seeing a lot of steam or bubbles, and you can start seeing a little movement right there, I will come back and we'll add a little bit of water. Actually, how long was that? Less than a minute, and we're starting to see some steam come up. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add more liquid. Oops. I meant to say I want to pour it on the yellow, but I accidentally poured it on the orange, because if a color is going to spread, I don't want things to come into the yellow. So actually I think that, although I don't want to lose the acid, so, okay, and I'm going to add a little bit down at the end with the pink. And also a little bit, I have not measured this, down at the edge with the purple. And you can see, there we go. That is making me feel a little more comfortable, just that we've got more liquid in here. We did not wait very long between adding liquid and coming over. There's a lot of pink in there. But we do want the acid to be able to spread a little bit. You can see it looks like some of that green may spread. I mean, we might lose the yellow. That is always a concern with a rainbow, that colors will come and overtake the yellow. But I guess I do want to cover this. Someday I will get steam pans with lids. But since the water level is so low, I want to trap some of that steam in so we can get more heat around everything. And I am going to reduce the heat to be more low. And I'll set a timer now for 10 minutes and we'll come back and check in. Here's the amount of each of the colors that I have left over. A lot of blue, mostly the colors of blue, but I guess we know that those tend to be fairly dominant anyway. So let's go check back in on our rainbow. All right, it's been 10 minutes. I'm officially going from medium low all the way down to low. And it happened. That's okay. We got some orange spread. It made it a more golden yellow. Okay, we still got lots of pink. There's a hint of blue in the green. I'm expecting, yeah. So it's mostly the pink that is left, which also means that I am not going to be flipping the yarn. Sometimes there can be a little bit of color left and I will flip. This is not one of those times. And the reason for that is that if I were to flip, that residual pink would spread, and that isn't what we want at all. So we'll take some of the acid that we have left. We'll bring some acid down to this end, and I'm bringing some more acid down to that end. Potentially it was when I added the water that pushed some of this orange and pink onto the yellow. We'll see what happens beneath the surface. It's still a rainbow. It's still beautiful. It's just that the colors are blending a bit more. So however this comes out, we still achieved the secondary colors that we wanted. If we didn't want the colors to bleed, a better way to do this would have been a hand-painted technique with everything spread out on the counter and then rolling it up and steaming it, because that would have really protected this yellow section. But I really wanted to play around with this technique. So That's what happens. But you can try mixing the colors. But hey, here's a challenge. Mix the colors using the same recipes I did and hand paint the colorway. And then show me how your yarn turned out. I would love to see it. Tag me on Instagram and put this episode number in the caption. So anyway, I am going to recover. All right, the foil is a little bit on the yarn. I really need to get pans with lids at some point. Anyway, I am going to recover and I'm going to let it sit on low for 20 minutes. Okay, let's check in. This is beautiful. It would not surprise me. Yeah, I'm seeing a hint of pink down there and a hint of pink down here still. It's not because of acid. It's just, if that pink, I believe it's fluorescent, similar to some other fluorescent colors we used, it's gonna need to just cool completely. So that's what we're gonna do. I just turned off the heat. I'm gonna let this cool completely in the pan, and then we can come and take another look. The yarn has cooled completely, and there might be a pink hint, a bare pink hint, but let's see. I don't see anything when I lift it up, and ooh, we got, let's check these edges. We got awesome color penetration. Oh, that is so good. There's a little bit of light pink over with that purple. And I think there's a tiny bit of a pale orange right there. Otherwise, the color penetration is so good. So, so good. If you really want a really saturated painted yarn, I so highly recommend doing this sort of starting cold with no acid in a more sealed container and then adding the acid and the heat. Oh, it's great. Let's wash the yarn. We still have some leftover dye, which we'll come back to in a moment. But let's wash this yarn. Some people will use, rather than the steam pan, they'll use a large, like under the bed storage container type thing, or even a tray that maybe would go inside a dog's crate, or something large with a little bit of a lip for this type of adding the color, being able to have space for extra liquid, and then adding the acid after the fact. We're seeing a little bit of pink runoff. I'm calling it runoff now versus bleeding because there was a tiny bit of pink left in the pan. But oh, this is beautiful. So pretty. And I'm really happy with the yarn base as well. It is not a high twist yarn, but it is still lovely. And I think that this technique gave us a much softer type of rainbow because the edges and between the color separation is not harsh. So I am going to go ahead and rinse this a handful of times. I have to keep reminding myself that this yarn is superwash because it's not feel-wise, but visually reminding me of some non-superwash yarn. I mean, that amount of color in there next to this is so tiny. I am not concerned, but I'm gonna rinse it a few more times and then check back in. Even with the next rinse, things are very clear. So I'm gonna go put this through my spin dryer and hang it up to dry. Meanwhile, we've got these leftovers. The leftover color that we mixed and some residual color that was a combination of all of the color that we rinsed. This was from rinsing out the graduated cylinders and from one other project. I rinsed out some measuring cups of the same 3 primary colors that we're using today. And we still got high acid. So that mixture of everything gave us this blue color. It was not an even mixture. The blue did seem to dominate. But this is going to give us a nice pastel base for our Leave No Dye Behind colorway. And I'm now going to heat things up and we'll come in with the rest of that dye. And I'm going to rinse the nearly empties into this jar again to layer on some more background color. We aren't bubbling yet, but it's definitely getting warm. I'm going to start with the blue. I have the most of it, and so that's why I thought it would be fun to start with it today. Since we've got 100 grams of yarn here, that should allow us to get good coverage without needing to flip it. The yarn that I'm using is Stroll fingering weight yarn, which is 75% superwash merino, 25% nylon. It should absorb color very similarly to that other colorway. Now I'm going to come in with the green, and I'm just adding it slowly all over a little bit. We are not going to get complete coverage, but we should have something fun. That's the goal, is to have something fun with lots of splotches of colors, maybe some spread, some pastel, but a little bit random. What we don't have is yellow, so we will be having orange, but I think it'll be okay. And come on, little blip of orange. Finally, I have the pink. And the colors are going to spread. Oh, that was a lot of pink. This is fairly random, potentially asymmetric, but I think just like a little fun, different kind. I would really enjoy doing this so sporadically without complete coverage, using the yellow as well. I could go and get some straight from the, I'm debating going and getting some from the stock solution, but no, I'm gonna let this be our leftovers, and I'm gonna go rinse out all these cups. It almost looks like nothing because all of the colors have combined to be so neutral. But I am adding this, ooh, you can kind of see it. It's not nothing. But this is also increasing the volume, which is gonna let some other colors spread, and it's just fun. This is just a fun leftover colorway. So I am going to heat this for 15 minutes, and then we'll come back. All right, the timer went off. I am going to turn off the heat here, and let's flip the yarn and see what it looks like. I'm expecting to see some pink in the pan. Oh, that's hot. Some pink in the pan because that's what we saw last time. And yeah, I mean, I'd say we got good color penetration for this random rainbow colorway that I think is a lot of fun. So I just turned off the heat. I'm gonna let it cool completely, then we can wash it, and then we will look at the finished dry yarn. How did we do, everyone? I mean, we did pretty darn well. In here, getting the same purple, the same blue. It did deepen in some areas. I do see some hints of this intermediate blue between those two colors. Similarly, I also see some of this green where the blue overlapped with the green we mixed. The yellow, it did get golder in some places, but I mean, that wasn't a color we mixed. It was just straight bright yellow, but it did blend with some of that orange, and I do see some notes from between this orange a little closer to the pink of that more reddish color as well. So not only did we mix a series of colors, but because we blended those colors together more on the yarn, we added some other intermediates. So I would say that this was an outstanding success in remixing and trying to recreate some of these hues we had mixed to dye a rainbow colorway. A triangle color mixing exercise like this is not only useful to help you decide what colors you want to mix, but it also can help you understand how the colors can blend together. And that as you're blending to make a purple and a blue, the intermediate is a deeper blue. And similarly, when you go from the yellow and the pink, you pass through a red, which is very, very interesting and useful to know just as you're playing with colors, because sometimes when you want things to combine and blend together, they might not blend the way that you think they will. So going through an exercise to look at the individual colors separately and how they mix is so helpful and useful. I discovered something when I was editing that color mixing video. This blue right here, that is 1 part fuchsia, 3 parts true turquoise, looks an awfully lot like Brilliant Blue from the other color mixing video. So here's Brilliant Blue, which is a primary. They're not identical, but they are really, really close. And you could probably get closer to this, maybe with a bit more pink. Actually, that one somewhere in between those two. So I think that if I was only going to pick one blue and one reddish hue, I would go for the true turquoise and bright fuchsia, hot fuchsia. Now, if I was only going to buy 6 colors, my 6 would be yellow, a fuchsia, a turquoise, and a true blue and red. So the 5 that I would pick from Jacquard would be Brilliant Blue, Fire Engine Red, I'm now blanking on the actual name, hot fuchsia, bright yellow, and then I would also add black in there because black is important. All of this is to say that the colors that you pick don't have to be pre-mixed colors. You can mix your own colors. But I do think that doing a color mixing exercise is really, really helpful, because had I not done that exercise, I might have tried to create this rainbow by mixing 1 part pink to yellow and 1 part blue to pink. And the colors that I would get from that wouldn't be something that would make me feel like I had a balanced rainbow. It might feel a little bit off. And I might have wished that, oh, I wish that this had more yellow in it, and similar feelings to that. I love this base from Dyer Supplier. It plumped up so beautifully. It reminds me a bit of Knit Picks Palette, which is a 2-ply fingering weight yarn, but Palette is not superwash, and this is. And I like dyeing superwash yarn a lot more because of the way it picks up color a little faster, and you don't really have to worry about felting. So that's why I have a personal bias towards it, but this is so soft and fluffy. I feel like it would be really, really nice for color work. I will be buying more of this in the future. If you want to learn more about the base, I do have an affiliate link down in the video description. I don't consider color mixing to be a strength of mine, and so that's why I'm having so much fun playing with these exercises, because it's really giving me a better feel for the colors. Now, some of these feelings are things that I've known a bit already. Like, I've known a little bit like, oh, okay, if I mix these two at 1-to-1, the red is so much more potent than the yellow. So there's some things that by trial and error you figure out, but really having everything laid out in a triangle just visually helps me so much. I've had a lot of requests to make a more balanced triangle, because looking at the triangle when I'm like, hey, this yellow is so much less potent. You know, a lot of people want me to pump up the yellow to try to see if I can make a triangle that feels more balanced. And I'm willing to try that at some point, but I don't feel like that exercise would be as useful to me as seeing what the triangle is in all of the unbalanced glory, because that unbalanced glory really, really helps me understand the relationship between the colors in the way I'm most likely to have them. Like, I'm most likely to have the colors mixed at a 1% stock. And so looking at this, maybe I know, okay, if I want to do mixing, maybe I want to start with half as much red to then get that balance that I need, or what have you. And so I think that if I were to make a more balanced triangle, it would be harder for me to look at the picture and understand how to mix the colors I want. Whereas for like this project, I mean, I happen to still have those mini skeins on hand, but I could also just look at the picture and see the relationship between the colors, and understanding what those ratios are, it helps me figure things out. So I hope that that makes sense. And again, I'm not opposed to doing a more balanced triangle, but there are reasons why this triangle specifically is really useful to me. And I think if I want to make a balanced rainbow, I'm going to go out and try to mix that directly versus trying to shift my equations to make it work. I hope that makes sense. Here is our bonus skein, and ooh, look how muted and awesome. I feel like I had some leftovers that maybe were a combination of a few colors that were really dilute I put on first, and then I poured these other colors on. But sometimes it's hard to remember exactly what I did for a Leave No Dye Behind like bonus skein, but I like this one a lot. We didn't have any yellow left, but it still works, and something about this just feels so, I don't know why I always see birds with more muted rainbows, but I see feathers and bird in this one. I do think it's funny to look at the bonus and think, oh, what a beautiful rainbow. And then put it back next to the full rainbow and think, bam, oh, that's pastel. Even though it's not really pastel, it's just so much more toned down than our bright rainbow. I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and I'm not done playing with these colors. I'm not done playing with color mixing, and I'm certainly not done with rainbows. I love rainbows. I love pre-mixed colors also, just because I also really enjoy playing with dry dye powder. But man, yeah, let me know down below what kinds of things you'd like to see going forward. I am so thrilled with how this turned out. Please make sure you're subscribed to the ChemKnits Tutorials YouTube channel and smash that bell icon to make sure your notifications are on so you never miss a new video. I always publish videos on every Tuesday and Friday morning, and we have lots of bonus content and live streams along the way, and you don't want to miss any of it. If you're already a ChemKnits fan for a long time and want other ways to support the channel, I do have an Etsy shop where most of the yarn I dye in my videos ends up, and I also have a Patreon. You can find links to everything down in the video description. Thank you so much for watching.